Concerning news for a starting SEC quarterback heading into spring practice, Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go check them out, FanDuel.com. All right, we got plenty to jump into, but we got to stop off in the swamp first and foremost, as we finding out yesterday, DJ Lagway is going to be limited this spring, according to Florida head coach Billy Napier. Napier talking with the media and noting that his sophomore quarterback is dealing with a shoulder injury and lower body issue. Napier asked about the ailments, said some lower body, some shoulder. Napier went on to say, I think our intentions here are to be very smart. I do think he'll be limited to throwing activities, but he will participate in all our practices otherwise. And we've done a lot of our homework here relative to the things that he went through as a player. Napier said, he was an absolute warrior and a great competitor that showed toughness. He went on to say, we have consulted with quite a few experts here from Florida Health and a national perspective, as we do with a lot of our players in terms of second opinions. So I think in general, he'll be able to do quite a bit, but there will be some limitations. Now, the interesting part here is, I don't like the vibe they're trying to spin this off as like, oh, they're just playing it safe, right? Just being precautious. That's where he says, I think our intentions here are to be very smart. But when he says, as we do with a lot of our players in terms of second opinions, I don't know. It just kind of made me go, what exactly is the issue here? Some lower body, some shoulder. Gators obviously want DJ Lagway 100% healthy for when they get to the fall. He's a true sophomore. And Napier mentioned using Lagway as a signal caller during Thursday's 7-on-7 work to keep him involved in learning the offense. Of course, he was a 5-star recruit, star player, and the future of the Gators very much lies in the hands of DJ Lagway. When he took over for the injured Graham Mertz, obviously big part of why Florida finished the season 8-5. And their only losses came when Lagway did not finish against Georgia and did not play in the Texas game. But Lagway finished his freshman year completing 115 of 192 passes, 1,900 passing yards, 12 touchdowns. Did have the 9 picks. Want to see him cut down on the interception total, but was recognized as the freshman All-American by the Football Writers Association of America and ESPN. And his freshman season, it had a lot of big-time highlights, and he's generating some Heisman buzz. Obviously, a lot of the sports books out there have him among the, the odds-on people in the top 10 for odds. So, it's in his hands moving forward, but he will be limited this spring. And so we'll see what that means for the Florida Gators. Now, as far as quarterbacks, they have Harrison Bailey, the former Tennessee quarterback who has had several stops at UNLV and Louisville, and he's coming over and presumes to be the backup. Then you have Aiden Warner, who's, another transfer from Yale that played a little bit last year, and it was not great. And then you have Clay Millen, who transferred in from playing at Nevada and Colorado State. So not a lot of great stuff behind Lagway, depending on what your opinion on Harrison Bailey is. But you definitely want to keep Lagway healthy, but you certainly want to, you don't want to have to lean on any of those guys behind him at any point this year. One other note on the Florida Gators, Billy Napier mentioning that they had 16 players on their injury report that are either limited or, may come back in some fashion this spring. Running back Trayon Webb, he's coming back from a lower leg injury. Wide receiver Trey Wilson coming back from that hip injury. Defensive tackle Caleb Banks has a foot injury. He will be limited. Linebacker Pup Howard, he was listed with an ankle, but Billy Napier said it's a soft tissue issue. And then their secondary, all banged up. Nickelback Sharif Denson with a foot. Safety Bryce Thornton with an ankle. Corner Dijon Johnson coming off of shoulder surgery. But of those 16 players that are hurt, Trey Wilson is apparently the healthiest and will be able to do the most in practice. So, again, he's another big part of that Florida offense. By the way, Florida's set to host their annual Orange and Blue Spring game coming up on April 12th. That will be at 1 p.m. Eastern. So a little over a month from now, we'll get to see the Gators, but I would assume, maybe not much DJ Lagway in that game based on what they're saying. So we'll see. Certainly something to track. Certainly something I want to watch heading into the summer months. All right. In other SEC news, how about over at Auburn? A little news on their season opener. According to reports, their season opener against Baylor will be played on a Friday night. Brett McMurphy of the Action Network reporting that Auburn will take on the Baylor Bears in Waco, Texas on Friday, August 29th. Now, not August 30th. So Auburn coming off that 5-7 season, 2-6 in the SEC, a monster year for Hugh Freeze and company. They've got to improve and take a step forward. Obviously, they bring in Jackson Arnold, the transfer quarterback from Oklahoma, former 5-star, hoping that he can revitalize this offense, get things going. But he's loaded with talent, tons of talent surrounding him. But that will be expected to be Friday night in Waco, Texas. So if you're an Auburn fan, you were planning your trip out there, make sure you get there a day earlier now. Gotta make the drive on a Thursday instead of Friday. If you're driving on Friday, that's pushing it to get out to Waco and get there for the game in time. But there will also be a Sunday game on opening weekend. That will be in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium between South Carolina and Virginia Tech. And other notable week one games in the conference, there's a lot of scrubs, a lot of teams in the SEC playing slappies week one, but some interesting ones of note. Alabama at Florida State is one. Tennessee against Syracuse, that one also in Atlanta. And LSU at Clemson should be a big one. I thought that one was going to be LSU's been playing like those Sunday night games on the holiday weekend, but it looks like that LSU Clemson game is set for Saturday. So nothing special there. And then the headliner that weekend is going to be Texas at Ohio State. Of course, the reigning national champs in Ohio State, Texas, and the debut of Arch Manning at quarterback. That is going to be a monster one. So, yeah, set your calendar. Some big games coming out of the gates SEC week one this year. And speaking of LSU, some news out of Baton Rouge yesterday as Brian Kelly has reportedly made a decision on their next defensive line coach. According to Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports, the Tigers set to hire former LSU star and national champion Kyle Williams to coach their D-line. Williams also played for the Buffalo Bills for more than a decade before retiring. He was an all-SEC guy under Nick Saban and Les Miles, and he is expected to replace Bo Davis, who LSU was after for years. Was on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama for many years and was over at Texas coaching up their D-line and doing a really good job there. And LSU was able to finally pull him away and get him to return to his alma mater. But he spent just 1 year with the LSU Tigers and making the jump to the NFL, where he will go join Kellen Moore's coaching staff with the New Orleans Saints. But LSU had a pretty extensive search. They were sniffing around on Florida D-line coach Gerald Chapman, who decided to stay with the Gators. But Kyle Williams doesn't have any college coaching experience, but he does at the high school level. He just served as the defensive coordinator at his alma mater, Ruston High School in Louisiana from 2020 to 2024. Like we talked about, accomplished player, man. Was part of that 2003 national championship team under Nick Saban, all SEC, all America honors, and a 6-time Pro Bowler during his 13 years with the Buffalo Bills. So LSU, Brian Kelly have not officially made the announcement yet, but Matt Zenitz rarely misses. So assume that news is going to happen. But an interesting hire there. Instead of getting a proven guy, you go get a guy who is a former Tiger, loyal guy that you think can do a good job there. And certainly he knows what it takes to play at a high level on that defensive line in the SEC. So interesting hire there for LSU. But Kyle Williams going to head to be LSU's defensive line coach there. And the more you heard about the rumors about Bo Davis, that he just wasn't, he was kind of in the Nick Saban camp of not a big fan of this NIL age, not necessarily paying the players, but the conversations of, you're such a good recruiter. And yet you go sit in these living rooms with parents and the first thing they're bringing up is money and what's the dollar amount and all this. And guys like Bo Davis are old school. They kind of got frustrated with it. And, they had some money set aside, promised to a kid, okay, we're giving you this. And then they come back and they want more. And he's like, what is this? What are we doing here? So you get the frustrations from some of the old school guys. But anyway, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we got some Tennessee Vols news and notes we will get to in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, a second half comeback, you could stay in the game and the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. And look, it's not just the NBA. They got college hoops up there as well. You want to get in on this exciting SEC tournament happening all next week. Yeah, you want to make sure that you are signed up at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Go make every moment more with FanDuel. They are the official sportsbook or sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. We'll get you more spring updates and that sort of thing. We were doing our spring previews going around the conference. We'll get to more of those starting next week. We'll also start bringing in some players, catching up with some current SEC players who are going to join the show over the next couple weeks. So you want to make sure you're subscribed and checking that out. But let's dive back into some of the news and notes going on around the conference. And how about over at Tennessee? They have set a kickoff time for their 2025 orange and white spring game. Yesterday was announced, the Vols announced details for the kickoff. It will be set for April 12th, and kickoff will happen at 2 p.m. Eastern. So what did we tell you earlier? Florida is having their orange and blue spring game April 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Well, 1 hour later that day, Tennessee will have theirs on April 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And there'll be a few things different about the 2025 orange and white game for the Vols. They got renovations going on at Neyland Stadium, and they'll be at partial capacity of the stadium at just 45,000. If you're attending the game, that will be the only way to see it live. Tennessee noted there will not be a live television or streaming broadcast of the spring game this year. So fans who can't make it out to the Neyland Stadium, I guess you're going to have to listen on the Vol radio network. But this is the new trend that we're seeing here. Alabama came out and said, like we've had a few schools say we're not playing a spring game. Missouri said they're not playing one. Texas said they're not playing one. We're at Alabama and Kalen DeBoer come out and say, yeah, we're going to do one, but, we're not going to televise it. So this is the new trend here. Coaches wanting to protect their roster and depth of their roster. Matt Rule at Nebraska was the first one to come out and say it. We all kind of laughed at it, but the coaches are serious about this. You have your fourth string wide receiver looks really good in the second half of your spring game. Some other coaches take note and go, hey, my kid's fourth string at that school. I'll make you second string or first string at my school. Transfer over here. And I think this is where we get closer to the spring portal having to go away. I think we're going to get closer to a portal that is only open in the off season, and that's it. When the season ends, whether end of December, end of January, whenever that portal will be, I think there's that one, and then that's it. As of now, we got the two portals. The spring portal will open following spring games here in a couple of weeks. But this marks year 5 under Josh Heupel, and Tennessee is 37-15 his first 4 seasons. Of course, this past year's squad made it to the college football playoff for the first time. 10-win season. Of course, it's an ugly loss at Ohio State, but doesn't take away from what they were able to accomplish in season. And so can they build on that? Well, how about some news from Tennessee on their corner, Ricky Gibson? Remember we told you a couple weeks ago that he was going to enter the transfer portal, and this was on the heels of having some injuries there in the secondary, and everybody kind of wondering, oh man, this is not great. Like, he was expected to be leaned on and be a big part of that secondary, with Jermod McCoy out for the spring with an injury. Well, Ricky Gibson will reportedly take part in spring practice, a notable development after indications were that he would be transferring. But Adam Sparks of the Knoxville News Sentinel reports that Gibson is expected to be out there with his teammates when the Vols open spring practice today. Gibson having a change of heart, it seems. Like we said, about 2-3 weeks ago, On 3 reported that Gibson planned to enter the transfer portal. Spring portal will not open until April 16th. So it was widely assumed he would not participate in spring ball and possibly risk injury if he's going to go play elsewhere. But Gibson, entering his junior season, was an impact freshman for the Vols, became a starter this past year, and had 5 pass breakups, 32 tackles, pretty good in coverage last year. So Josh Heupel and staff, they won't know. Is Gibson staying? Is he going? Well, he'll be out there practice. We'll see what he ultimately decides. But Tennessee's orange and white spring game again set for April 12th. And one more Tennessee note here. Josh Heupel adding to his staff, adding some experience. Veteran NFL coach Alan Williams, defensive-minded coach, is joining the Tennessee Volunteers program. He started his NFL career in 2001 under Tony Dungy in Tampa, followed him to Indianapolis, and was part of that Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. Williams also coached for the Vikings as a defense coordinator, the Lions, and the Chicago Bears. And his specialty is coaching DBs. So you expect Alan Williams. Hey, Alan Williams, meet Ricky Gibson. It's a guy you might be helping coach here. But Heupel has added some experience on that staff this offseason. Williams is the 3rd analyst hire of the offseason for Heupel. Mike Eckler departed to Nebraska, but he promoted analyst Evan Crabtree to special teams coordinator, hired veteran NFL special teams coach John Bonamago, and then also made experience hire on the offensive side in hiring former North Texas head coach Seth Luttrell, who, of course, was a former teammate of Josh Heupel's at Oklahoma. And his other offseason coaching moves were promoting Chop Harbin from analyst to outside linebackers coach and bringing OU quarterback Landry Jones onto the staff for his first ever coaching role. So, again, Tennessee hitting the practice field today to start their spring ball. And if you missed it, we had a good preview of the season with, or the spring rather, with Eric Kane of Locked On Vols last week right here on Locked On SEC. So if you missed that, I encourage you guys to go check that out. All right, we still got more SEC news to come. Could Kentucky lose one of their top assistant coaches? We'll talk about that here coming up in just a second. More Locked On SEC right after this. Well, first, I want to remind you guys, we are all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It is powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X Learn more about it at nissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC, and a few more tidbits we got to jump into here as we'll make a stop over at Kentucky in Lexington. It's Vince Marrow, who has been an assistant coach at Kentucky since 2013. He's been the tight ends coach as well. Before that, he was the tight ends coach at Toledo back in 2008, was the head coach at Holland High School. But Vince Marrow apparently eyeing a head coaching job in the MAC. According to Football Scoop, Marrow has interviewed for the head coach job at Bowling Green. And it's a little bit late in the process. Bowling Green looking to get a deal done. Other candidates include Mercer coach Mike Jacobs, Minnesota co-defensive coordinator Nick Monroe are the two other candidates that have interviewed. So Marrow being potentially hired is how much is Bowling Green willing to spend? Last season, Marrow made $1.3 million at Kentucky, one of the more higher-priced assistant coaches on a staff. And if you look, Bowling Green paid their last coach, Scott Loeffler, $500,000, basically. He left this offseason to go be the quarterback's coach for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Ironically, he's replacing Doug Nussmeier, father of Garrett Nussmeier, who went to go be the assistant from the New Orleans Saints. But nothing imminent. We'll see when an announcement is made on who they're going to hire, but it'll be a big loss. Vince Marrow has been a big part of that staff under Mark Stoops there at Kentucky. Has helped recruit. Everybody loves him. Talked to all the players throughout the years that we've interviewed on the show. They all love Vince Marrow, so that would be a potentially big loss, especially this point in the offseason, right? I mean, you would think if this would have happened, it would have happened in December or January or something. But of course, like we said, Loeffler leaving college this late in the game, and the job opened up. So we'll see. But wish Vince Marrow the best of luck, whatever he decides to do. How about some news over at Oklahoma, as they've got a position change happening for former four-star prospect ahead of his senior season. Jaron Kanak, former four-star prospect at linebacker, he's going to make a switch from defense to offense. Played very well at linebacker for the Sooners, but 6'2", 230 pounds. He is going to play tight end this fall as new offense corner Ben Arbuckle is looking for new weapons. Kanak only played 92 snaps at linebacker last year, but the year before was big-time contributor. Played almost 600 snaps. So a little bit of more of a reserve role last year with the linebackers, so he will get a shot to help out that offense, which, of course, struggled a lot last year with Seth Luttrell getting fired mid-season, and so now they bring in Ben Arbuckle with quarterback John Napier from Washington State and hoping they can bring some of that success with them. But you look at the depth chart, they got a redshirt freshman Devon Mitchell at tight end. They bring over transfer in Carson Kent from Kennesaw State. And, they lose Bauer Sharp. He entered the transfer portal. He's over at LSU now. So they need some help at that tight end spot. But Kanak was the number 156 player and the number 6 athlete in the country when he signed with OU back in 2022. So, again, see how he translates to that tight end spot. Help out Oklahoma. And one more tidbit before we get out of here. How about Greg Sankey taking shots at Danny Kanell? As we know, Danny Kanell, very outspoken hater of the SEC on social media, loves all things ACC. We've had him on the show many times throughout the year, and we like Danny, but he can be a bit of a troll on social media. But Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, likes to call out people sometimes that speak very negatively about the SEC. So Danny Kanell taking a shot at the SEC, saying that the SEC was overrated in basketball, despite the fact the SEC could potentially have 13 teams in the NCAA tournament. He did not Sankey did not take long to respond to Danny Kanell on Twitter, bringing some facts to the table. He tweeted, "Just helping explain why the SEC is quote unquote overrated. 30 wins, 4 losses versus the ACC. And Sankey puts in parentheses, wow. 14 wins, 2 losses versus the Big 12. He put in parentheses, oh my. This is the tougher one. He put 10 wins, 9 losses to the Big 10. I mean, that's barely over 500. He put a thumbs up to that. And then he said 185 wins, 23 losses in non-conference games. And he used the emoji with the guy smiling with sunglasses on. And he finished the message saying, I confess at SEC teams have a 500 record in games after January 4th. Sure, let's go with overrated. That, of course, a reference to some of the broadcasters out there who are very confused throwing out stats. You know, the SEC is only 500 since the start of January. Yeah, when they started conference play, when everybody takes either a win or a loss. So a good dig there by Greg Sankey and a good callback to a joke from earlier in the season. SEC's been outstanding this year in college basketball. Can't wait to see how many teams they get in. And next week's SEC tournament should be outstanding out there in Nashville. Okay, one more tidbit before we call it a show. How about news coming out of Oregon yesterday that Dan Lanning reportedly reaching a new 6-year deal with the Oregon Ducks. New contract will raise his average salary close to $11 million annually. That's according to ESPN. His new deal is pending board approval, but it will run for 6 years and take him through the 2030 season. His buyout to leave remains $20 million. But Dan Lanning, the former Georgia defense coordinator, of course, 38 years old. He's been 35-6 in 3 seasons coaching the Ducks. Of course, went undefeated during the regular season last year, won the Big Ten. And the Ducks earned the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff, but lost to Ohio State in the second round at the Rose Bowl. Yahoo Sports had that news first on Dan Lanning. But kind of interesting because, again, that's a name that is going to come up with his great success, that if any of these SEC jobs open, people will start throwing his name around. Oh, well, you think we can get Dan Lanning? You think we can get Dan Lanning? You know, people were throwing his name around last year as soon as Nick Saban retired. Oh, you think he would leave Oregon, come to Alabama? Yeah, so $20 million buyout, but, you know, make it $11 million annually. That puts him up there amongst the best of the best in college football in terms of contracts. So he's doing pretty well there at Oregon. I don't know, you know, you're going to have a really attractive job to draw him out of there and pay that massive buyout to, you know, to make that happen. But congrats to Dan Lanning, and, you know, keep saying, would love to see a Kirby Smart versus Dan Lanning playoff game, potentially a Georgia-Oregon matchup, or even a Georgia-Miami matchup to see Carson Beck, former Georgia quarterback, go against his former club. So a lot of potentials out there. We'll see what happens as the season goes along and who makes the playoff. But thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Hey, for your second listen, go check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout all the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Everybody have a great weekend out there. Enjoy the final regular season weekend of men's basketball. We'll get you caught up to date with everything next week happening around the conference right here on Locked On SEC.